We're in the Gemara Daf Nun Ches Amud Aleph, towards the bottom of the Amud, where it says Hoya Moedid V'Higia. This goes back to the Mishnah on the bottom of Nun Zayin Amud Beis, which talks about measuring the Tchum Shabbos. So it says in the Mishnah, Hoya Moedid V'Higia Legai. You're measuring and you come to a valley, or legeder, or a wall. So what do you do? Mavliyoi. Mavliyoi. What does Mavliyoi mean? You span it. Just go straight across. And then the Mishnah's lashon was v'chayzer lemidasei. Return to where you are measuring. Nches Amud Aleph, towards the bottom of Nches Amud Aleph. V'chayzer lemidasei. Then you come back to where you're measuring. So the Gemara now, as I mentioned already in the Mishnah, is medayik this expression of the Mishnah. Chayzer lemidasei. You come back. Where do you leave to come back? The fact that the Mishnah says chayzer, that you're coming back to where you're measuring, what does that prove? If in the place where you're measuring, you come to a valley that you cannot span it, why not? As long as it's below 50 amas, you could, because the string that a person uses to measure is 50 amas. So if it's less than 50 amas, you can span it. Havla. If you can, so then what do? So you have to go to the side, go to an area where the valley is less than 50 amas, and there you could span it. And then look back and see, to come back to the place where you're holding, to be able to continue counting. And you return over there to continue measuring the place where you until where you measured further down. So that's the concept of chayzer, that you can go further out to a place where it's going to be less than 50 amas, and then come back to where you were.
What about if it's very steep, that you can't walk down, it's very steep, so then you still count that? Or do you need to walk around? People need to walk around.
Yeah, you're going to have to walk around, but the question is though, you have one person on one side, another person on the other side. We're not talking now about how you're going to get to the other side. He'll figure out how to get to the other side. There's another person that's helping him that's on the other side. But if the actual valley is only less than 50 amas wide, so then you hold the string on one side and on the other side, and you just continue going straight where you are. If it's wider than 50 amas, you can't do that. So therefore you have to go further out and come back to where you are. This pshat we said here is a raya to this that it was taught in a braisa. It says basically this thing beferish. You're measuring the tchum, and you arrive to a valley. If you could span it with the rope that you're using, which is 50 amas, the rope of 50 amas, so then you do havla, you include it, you just continue going. Lav, if you can't, if it's wider than that, you go further out to a place where it's narrow enough to be able to span it, and then you have to look and see where to come back in a straight line, to go back to where you're holding, to continue measuring from there. Then this Braisa says, if this valley is slanted, so then makter v'oile makter v'yored. So if it's a place that a person could go down easily and come back up, right? So then you have to do a different kind of, you have to measure it in a different kind of way. Makter v'oile and makter v'yored. What is makter v'oile and makter v'yored? We learned about this before already. Correct. No, you remember how you do that? One person stands and you hold it. You can't physically pierce it. So one person is standing and holding the rope by his heart. The other person that's ahead of him is by his feet. So like this, you're not measuring in a slant. You're measuring in a straight line. Then the Braisa says, Higia lekaisel. If you come to a wall, then do you have to measure the width of the wall as well? So the Braisa here says, Ein oimrim yikav hakaisel. You don't have to pierce through the wall, meaning you don't have to figure out a way how to actually measure the wall itself. How would you measure the wall itself? You have to basically have two poles on both sides of the wall and place the rope above the wall and then see the width of the wall. That's how you would pierce through the wall. That's how you would measure the width of the wall. So the Braisa says you don't have to do that. You just could estimate. You look at the thickness of the wall, you estimate what it is, and you can just continue going and measure from there. That's the Braisa. So the Gemara now is going to focus on the last thing that it said here in the Braisa. When you have a wall, you don't have to actually measure the thickness of the wall, you can just estimate. In fact, the Gemara This is a new thing. You can just estimate. Why is that? But we learned in the Mishnah, if you have a wall, the Mishnah spoke about a valley, it also spoke about a wall. It said in the Mishnah that if you have a wall, you do have to measure the thickness of the wall. Mavliyoi, you have to span it, you have to continue going, but you basically have to, like I said, put up 2 poles and go over the wall and measure it in that way. Why are we saying over here that it's enough if a person just estimates? So the Gemara answers, Hasam nichet hashmishta. In the Mishnah, we're talking about a wall that's not so steep. It's not a regular wall. We're talking about there's a pile of bricks, a pile of stones that you can walk over it and you can come down. So it's possible for the person to go up and down. So therefore, Chachamim were mechayiv a person, they obligated a person to measure it, to span it, and you can't just estimate it. Over here, we're talking about a wall that's too steep and a person can't go up on it, and therefore over here, they didn't require him to measure it. Over here, it's enough if he just estimates the thickness of the wall and he can continue going. This is there's a few pshatim here in the Gemara, but this is Taisus' pshat.
Mountain would be the same concept.
We're going to see soon in the Gemara. The Gemara is going to talk about a mountain, how steep the elevation of a mountain is. The Gemara is going to discuss that. Yes, there's a similar thing. Amar Rav Yehuda Mashmuel. Now Rav Yehuda Mashmuel says as follows. Here, he's talking about Mekader v'hoilach. Again, let's just review. We have a few different ways of measuring when you come to areas that are not flat. If it's an area that's flat, it's simple. You just measure flat. But if it's an area that's not flat, so we have basically 2 options. One option is havla, that you have to span it, you go across, you don't have to go down, up, you just go across. Then there's another option, which is mekader v'hoilach. Mekader v'hoilach means that the person has to go down and come back up, but how do you measure it? You don't have to measure the entire, the whole slope that comes down and comes up. You do it in a way, mekader. Like we mentioned before, you're piercing through by measuring it in a way that you don't include the whole slope of the going down. Now Shmuel says, Amar Rav Yehuda Mashmuel, regarding mekader v'hoilach, lo yishanu, when was it said that's the method that's used to measure? If the chut hamishkailis does not come down, kenegdai. What is this chut hamishkailis? So Rashi here explains. You have a picture over there? Okay, so there's a picture, I'm sure, over here in the back of the Gemara. The chut hamishkailis is a tool, basically, that's used to, you can look over here in picture Shin Nun Aleph. Picture Shin Nun Aleph, or in picture Shin Nun Dalet. Well, right now, let's start with picture Shin Nun Dalet. So basically, they had this weight that they placed all the way down at the bottom, and then there was a rope that they held up, that they lifted up to the top, in order to see, that was used by builders to see how they're building, to measure it, that it's building straight up. So this is how they measured it, that it's built right. So over here, if a person standing, you see a picture Shinun Aleph, if a person on the top of the page, if a person is standing at the top and he's measuring and he comes to a valley, and if he puts down this chut hamishkailis, it's not going to reach all the way to the bottom. It's slanty enough that it's going to stop somewhere in the middle. It's not going to go straight down to the bottom. This is a case where the person has to measure. How does he have to measure? He has to measure the whole slope coming down with the method of mekader v'hoilach. He has to measure the whole slope coming down. Okay. But then, that's one case. But what if it's steeper than that? What if the drop into the valley is straight down? Avol, chut hamishkailis yeirit kenegdai. If, when the person drops down this weight to the bottom, it goes straight down all the way to the ground, into this valley, then then the slope of this valley, you don't have to measure it, you don't have to do mekader v'hoilach, it's too steep. Then you just have to go into the valley inside and you measure the floor of the valley, and then you come back up and you continue. You don't have to be mekader v'hoilach, you don't have to measure the slope coming down. So you see in picture Shin and Dalet, the drop down into the valley is so steep that the mishkailas, this weight that you drop down, goes straight down. So if it goes straight down, in such a case, you just measure the bottom, you measure the floor, and then you continue going. Okay, so that's the...
Doesn't he have to go further out? You see that, that piece, like that, at Correct.
Yeah.
Extend it out and then drop it.
That's correct. The Gemara is going to talk about that soon. We'll get back to that soon.
In the Shin Nun Gimel is the one that's mamish goes straight down.
Correct. In Shin Nun Gimel, you have it and it goes straight down. So it's so steep, so that slope, it's mamish straight down, you don't have to measure that. You just measure the bottom, the ground on the bottom. So like they show you, for example, the picture, the bottom is 44 amas, that's what you measure, and you continue going. Yeah. Okay. Sagt the Gemara weiter, v'kama oimkei shel gei. Now, another question that he's asking over here is that when we talk about going back to the halacha of havla, when we say that you could span it, that you can go across, and you don't have to measure going down and coming up, you can go straight across, how deep could this valley be that you measure with havla? Rav Yosef says, alpayim, only 2,000 amas. If it's Tchum Shabbos, 2,000 amas deep, so then you can go straight across. Right? But if it's deeper than that, then you can't. So then you have to be mekader. Then you have to measure the slope going down, coming back up. If it's too deep, so then you can't just go straight across. 2,000 amas, that's the shear. Eisve Abaye brings him a braisa where it says different. Omuk kuf. If it's 100 amas deep, v'reichav nun, and it's 50 amas wide, mavliyai. Then you could span it, you can go straight across. You don't have to go down. But v'mlav e mavliyai. If not, in other words, if it's deeper than 100 amas, so then you have to be mekader. You have to measure coming down and coming up. So we see that the amount that we look at is if it's 100 amas, not 2,000 amas. Right? So the Rishonim say this comes from the Mishkan. The length of the chutz of the Mishkan was 100 amas. So therefore over here, if it's 100 amas, so then you can go straight across. If it's more than 100 amas, so then you can't come, you have to go down, you have to measure coming down and coming back up. So there's a Beferish Braisa that says different than what Rav Yosef said. So the Gemara says, Hu da'ama ka'cherim. Rav Yosef is following the opinion of Acherim, the Tanya Acherim Maimrim, Afila Amok Alpayim. Even if it's deep 2,000 amas, v'reichav nun, and it's wide 50 amas, mavliya. You can be mavliya, you don't have to measure going down, you can go straight across. This is one version of what Rav Yosef said. Others said, Rav Yosef, Afila yeser malpayim. Even if the depth of this valley, the drop, is more than 2,000 amas deep, still, you can go straight across. If it's less than 50 amas, you can span it, you don't have to measure mekadev eilach. Come on. So now, if this is what Rav Yosef said, the Gemara asks, according to who is this? The Leikat Tanakama, the Leikat Acherim. It's not like the opinion of the Tanakama that says 100 amas, and not like the opinion of Acherim that says 2,000 amas. He says even more. So the Gemara answers, Hassam, the argument of Acherim and the Tanakama is in a case, She'ein chut hamishkeilis yerid kenegdai. It's not so steep. Not so steep. If you throw down this weight and it doesn't go straight down, it gets stuck somewhere in the middle of the slope coming down. If it's not so steep, over there, they gave various different shiurim, how deep it could be, and you can still span it. But over here, over here, when Rav Yosef said that even more than 2,000 amas, he's talking about a case where it's very, very steep. It goes straight down. The chut hamishkeilis drops straight down. So therefore, in such a case, what's the halacha? So Taisus over here explains you can't be mavliya. The Gemara already said before, in a case where it goes straight down, so what do you have to do? In a case where it goes straight down, you measure just the bottom. You measure the floor and the bottom, and then you continue going. You don't have to measure the slopes coming down. You measure just the floor and the bottom.
Depends how deep it is.
Yeah, I'm talking about if it's more than 2,000 amas. If it's less than, if it's more. Rav Yosef said, even if it's deeper than 2,000 amas. Rav Yosef says, even if it's very, very deep, doesn't matter how deep it is. But if it's the chut hamishkeilis goes straight down. In other words, it's a very steep drop straight down. So then you measure the bottom, and then you continue going.
How much the bottom has to be?
Doesn't make a difference. Up to 50. 50. Oh, we had the maximum in the width. You mean? Yeah, that's we learned in the Mishnah. 50 amas. Yeah. No, the minimum. There's no minimum. You have to measure whatever it is, but up to 50 amas because that's the length of the rope that you're using. Now the Gemara discusses one more detail which you mentioned before. When we say that the chut hamishkeilis, it's not it doesn't go down directly. it goes down more gradually, and therefore when you throw down the weight, it doesn't drop straight to the bottom. At kama, how much is this that has to be removed from the edge of the valley going down? How much removed is it? Amaravimi dalit. This is 4 amas. As long as from the top going down, this 4 amas removed to the bottom, that's not a steep drop. It's 4 amas. Do they have a picture for this? Which picture is it? No. No, I don't see the picture.
What's the Pachas Midal Damas? Well, it shows Pachas Me'aba Amas. No, Shinun Damas.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, okay, I guess so. That's what it goes on. Yeah, if it's less than 4 amas from the top, and you throw down the mishkoilis and it goes straight down to the bottom, so then that's a steep drop that you don't have to measure the slope coming down. But if it's more than dal damas removed from the wall, right? So then
because then it's not so steep.
It's not so steep. So then you have to measure.
Roll down, but it's
right?
rolling down, but it's already 8 amas.
Further away, so therefore it's not so steep. So therefore you have to measure the whole slope coming down. Talk to Gemara. Yigia lahar. The next thing it said in the Mishnah is if you're measuring and you come to a mountain, what do? Mavliyai v'chayzel midasai. So you're mavliya the mountain. So which would mean that we had this before already. If you want to have a picture for the mavliyai, just like you do benegeh to a valley that you span it, you do the same thing also with a mountain. You had it before in picture Shin Lamed Vav. You put up 2 poles on both sides of the mountain, and you spread out the rope of 50 amas above the mountain, and you continue going that way. You don't have to count. You don't have to measure the slope going up and coming down. If it's less than 50 amas, you just go straight across. Okay, that's what it said in the Mishnah. Now the Gemara will explain how steep is this mountain. How steep is this mountain we're talking about over here? Rava said, we're talking about a mountain that the elevation to 10 tfachim is within 4 tfachim. So if it's that steep that it gets to 10 tfachim within 4 tfachim, so then you're mavliya, like we just said over here. But if it's not as steep as that, it reaches to the height of 10 tfachim in the length of 5 tfachim, so then, you have to measure it like a flat land. You have to measure it like a regular flat land. Take a look in picture Shinun Vav. Right, so it reaches a height of 10 tfachim within 4 amas. So then, you just span it. You have to measure above it. But you don't measure it like a flat land. You don't have to go up and down. But if it reaches to the height of 10 tfachim only within 5 amas, it's not as steep. So then you have to measure the entire thing regular, like a flat land. So it's a very simple concept. You're never going to have the land to be exactly level in 2,000 amas that you're measuring. There's always going to be going up, going down to some extent. But if it doesn't, the only time we say that you're mavliya, that you could ignore the mountains, that then you can be mavliya, is if it reaches a certain height within 4 tvachim, or within 4 amas actually. If it reaches the height of 10 tvachim within 4 amas, so then that's steep enough that you could be mavliya. Otherwise, you treat it like regular flat ground. Similar concept. According to Rashi. According to Rashi's pshat, it's a similar concept, yeah. Okay, sagt die Gemara weiter. Rav Huna bereider Rav Nosson masni lekula. Rav Huna bereider Rav Nosson said this statement of Rava in a much more lenient way. Amar Rava lo yishanu ela bahara maslaket asara mitoy chamesh. If you have a mountain that reaches the height of 10 tvachim within 5 amas, so then you're mavliya. Aval bahar hamaslaket asara mitoy dalid. If it's steeper, if it reaches the height of 10 tvachim within 4 amas, then you don't even have to span it. You don't have to measure it b'chlal. Then you could just estimate the height and you could continue going. Similar to what we learned before, according to Rashi, when the Braisa said when you have a wall and it's very steep, you don't have to measure the thickness of the wall. You just estimate it and you continue going. Same thing over here, because this is the height of this mountain is so steep, you don't have to measure it at all. Okay. Sagt die Gemara weiter, what did the Mishnah say? That if a person is measuring and he's forced to go out of his, you want to measure a tchum, you usually want to measure in a straight line, 2,000 amos in a straight line. But if you come to a valley that's more than 50 amos wide, you're going to have to go out of your straight line. You have to go away and then come back, like we saw in the pictures before. But the Mishnah said, if you're going out of your straight line, you can't go out and away from where you're measuring, away from the city, out of the tchum of the city. You can't go too far away out of the tchum of the city and then come back to measure where you're measuring. Why not? What's the reason? My time. If when you're measuring, you're going to measure your tchum away from the city more than the tchum, people might come to say that this is within the tchum of the city. They're not going to realize why you're measuring so far from the city. They're going to think that you're measuring there because it's actually within the tchum of the city. Really, the reason why you're measuring so far is because you don't have a flat land that you could measure, so you have to go further out and then come back for the measuring. But people might think that you're measuring in that place and that's part of the tchum. That's gzeira.
But that's the question. What if Taki you can't? It's so steep that you have to go around. People. So if you're going to measure, people are going to think that it's Taki.
So then it's mekad v'hoilach. So that's in such a case you can't be mavliya. You can't come out and come back in. Yeah, you have to continue where you are. You have to go down and come back up. You can't go so far. Sagt die Gemara weiter. Im eine yachal avliya taner rabbanon learnt na braise. Keitzad mekadrin tachtoin keneged liboy elyoin keneged margaloisov. So how does a person keitzad mekadrin? This when it said in the Mishnah mekadav v'hoilach, how is this done? One person, the tachtoin, the person on below, holds the rope near his heart, and the person that's above him keneged margaloisov holds the rope by his feet. So then the rope ends up being straight. We had a picture before of this, right? Yeah. Where is it? Which picture is it? Picture Shemem Hey. So you don't end up including in your measurement the slant of the slope, and then it's going to be much longer. You just go in a straight line in this way. Amar Abaye, naktinon ein mekadrin ela bechevel shel arba amas. Abaye says that we only use in such a case when you're measuring in this method, it can only be 4 amas long. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba bar Avua ein mekadrin loy be'egla arufa v'loy bare miklat. When it comes to egla arufa, so by egla arufa you have to measure when you have a dead body and you have to see to which city it's closer to. You have to measure how close it is to a city. Over there you have to measure on the ground. If you have a hill, you have to measure every single inch of the hill the way it is. There's no mekadav v'hoilach. You don't use this method at all to shorten the distance. You measure it, whatever it is. And the same thing goes with the Ir Miklat. The Ir Miklat is supposed to have a tchum around it, and the tchum around it is also part of the Ir Miklat of 2,000 amas. Over there also you measure, whatever it is, if it's a flat land, if it's a hill, if it's a valley, you measure everything fully. There's no other method that you could use. Mipnei shehein shel Torah. Because those are measurements that are minat Torah, so there's no leniencies in the measuring if it goes up or it comes down and so on. Yeah. Okay. Let me just go back for a second. I want to correct something that I read before and I didn't read it right. Could we go back to Amud Aleph for a second? Daf Nun Ches Amud Aleph. Okay, so we have about 6 lines from the bottom. Im hoye gai mu'ukam. Gai mu'ukam. So I didn't touch this before properly. Gai mu'ukam means when you have a valley that's outside of a city and you're measuring, but it's not just a valley on one side. Let's say a person is measuring towards Maidav. And he's going, and right over there you have a valley. But the valley is not only over there on Maidav, it comes around on the Tzofan side of the city. So even if you want to come around and then return to where you are, what did we say? If you can't measure in a place where there's a valley, because the valley is too wide, it's more than 50 amas, you come to a smaller place and then you come back. So over here, what the Braisa is talking about is Gai Mu'ukam. In order for you to go around and come back, you're going to have to go all the way around to Tzafin side and then come back. That you can't do. Okay, so you have the picture of this. If it's coming around, if it's Mu'ukam, take a look and picture Shin Mem Zayin. So you see over here, you're measuring, and now if you want to go, it's going to be very complicated to go back, to go away, and you have to go all the way around to Tzafna side, then come all the way back around, that's too far. You can't rely on that. Taisva says, it's different pshat on why you can't do this. Taisva says, we're afraid that the person is going to lose the cheshbon of exactly where he is. He has to look and see and come back to the exact place and continue his measurement. If it's coming around to that extent, we don't rely on a person coming around from Ma'ariv to Tzafna side and then go all the way back.
You can mark it where
you could, true, but we don't rely on that. In such a case where it's coming around, we don't rely on that. And that's where the Braisa says, that you have to, you're going to be forced to go down and measure with the method of Mekadev Eilach. Okay, now we start on the winning. Let's go to the Mishnah. Who's the one that does this medida, who measures a mumche? It's to be an expert. There are different shatim in what an expert means. Rashi says simple. Expert means a person that's an expert in measuring. There's others that say, other Rishonim say that an expert means a person that's an expert in Hilchas Eiruvin. He knows the halachas, not just an expert in measuring, but an expert in halachas. It's another pshat. Taisus brings a pshat from Rabbeinu Chananel that says that when you measure, so you maiden element mumche, you have to measure in a straight line. That the word mumchi brings a machal, he brings a pasuk that shows that it means that you measure in a straight line. And even when you go away, you have to come back to that straight line. That's how you measure. Okay, sagt the Mishnah weiter, riba l'makim echad. You measured in one place, and you came to a further place with your tchum. Umiyat l'makim acher. Then you measured in a different place, and you ended up with a smaller tchum. Shaimin l'makim sheriba. You follow the place which gave you a longer tchum. There could be differences when you're measuring different places. The terrain is not always the same, and you end up in one place with a longer tchum and one place with a smaller tchum. You go l'kula with a bigger tchum. Sagt the Mishnah weiter, riba le'echad umiyat le'echad. So as the Gemara will explain, the pshat of what the Mishnah is saying here is, you had two different people that were measuring the tchum, and one person came out with a larger tchum, another person came out with a smaller tchum. Shaimin l'meruba. We follow the one that came out more lenient with a longer tchum. Then the Mishnah says another leniency regarding measuring the tchum. Vafila evet, vafila shivcha, nemanim loima at kan tchum Shabbos. Even an evet or a shivcha, they're also believed to say that until here is the tchum of Shabbos. We rely even on them. Okay. Okay. So this would be a mumche saying. The Mishnah started off saying a mumche.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you say b'medida mela, evet and shivcha could be b'medida, but in dina Eiruvin.
Right. It's not saying over here that we rely on them to measure. The Mishnah is saying we rely on them, we believe them to say until here is the Tchum Shabbos. That it was measured and until here you're allowed to go. When it comes to the Gzeira of the Tchum, Chachamim were mekel, they were lenient regarding the Tchum, that in any case where there's an option to follow lenient or stringent measurement, you always go with the more lenient measurement. Dr. Gemara, going to the Lashon of the Mishnah, so what did it say? If you had two measurements, so then the Mishnah said that you follow the measurement that was longer. Fragt the Gemara, l'makim sheriba in, l'makim shemiyat loy, is the Mishnah saying that you follow the measurement that gave you a longer tchum, and you don't follow the measurement that's shorter? What do you mean you don't follow the measurement that's shorter? That's included. That's if you're going further out, for sure you can include that. B'chlal masayim mana, Rashi says. So the makim shemiyat loy. So the Gemara says no. Eimed, the way to read the Mishnah is af l'makim sheriba. Of course, you can go to that place which was the smaller tchum. But you can go even further. You can go even to the length of the longer measurement. Riba le'echad umiyat le'echad chulu. So at this point, the Gemara does not understand what's this case that the Mishnah is saying. Hasu lamali. Hainu hach. It's saying the same thing that we said before. You had two measurements. One measurement was shorter, one measurement was longer. What's this other case in the Mishnah here? So the Gemara explains, Hachikama, this is the pshat. Riba echad umiyat echad. Two different people. Before we were talking about the same person that measured. One person measured, in one place he measured closer, and in one place he measured further. Now we're talking about two different people that measured. So then, Shaimin l'zeh sheriba. You follow the one that came out with a longer measurement. Amar Abaya said, if you have two people that measured and they came out with a different measurement, so how much? How much could be the difference between them that I say that you follow the one that measured longer? So let's say one guy measured another amma, another 5 amas, another 10 amas longer. But how about if you measure hundreds of amas more? The difference, the discrepancy between these two people is so much more. So you still follow a person that measured more. So he says, you don't follow more than midas se'ir balaksaina. What does midas se'ir balaksaina mean? We learned already before. When you measure the tchum 2,000 amas, when you measure what you measured in a straight line, you measure it diagonally, you get an extra 800 amas. Right, so in the corner of the city, you measure diagonally, you get an extra 800 amas. Right, so if the difference between them is that 800 amas, so then you can say that the reason why one measured longer, one measured shorter, is because he made a mistake in this detail of the halacha of how to measure. He measured even diagonally, he also measured 200 amas. He didn't give it the extra space for the corners of 800 amas. Or if he measured in the corner 2,000 amas, so then when you measure straight, you're going to get much less than that. You can take a look at it. We had this already before. I'm sure they have the picture over here for this, where you can see the difference of, there has to be some kind of a basis, some kind of a logic to the mistake that they made. If there's no logic to the mistake that they made, so then there's no reason to rely on the longer tchum. Okay, I don't see over here the picture for this. Yeah.
But it's Reish Samach Vav, you see it. Reish Samach Vav.
The picture?
Yeah. I mean, it's the concept of Zovis.
Correct, yeah.
Lamed Dalet. Top right. Reish Samach Vav.
Yeah, exactly. The extra 800 amas. It's one picture. There's others also, right. Yeah. Okay, let's go weiter. Sagt die Gemara, the whole Indian of Erev Tchumen, they weren't stringent, they were lenient with it. It's a Gzeira with the Rabbanon, so therefore they were lenient. Fragt the Gemara va Tanya, but we learned in the Braise, in a Braise it says that the Chachamim established Erev Tchumen to be machmer, not to be lenient. Ravina explains, the whole concept of Erev Tchumen is a Gzeira with the Rabbanon to be machmer more than Minat Torah. Minat Torah, according to most opinions, there's no issa to walk out of your tchum. So obviously, when Chacham were masakin the tchum Shabbos, they were coming to be machmer more than what it is Minat Torah. Utchumen derabanan. However, since the whole institution of tchum is midrabanan, so therefore, when it comes to different sfeikis or different measurements of the tchum, we're lenient. So the Braisa that says that we're machmer is saying that we're machmer more than Minat Torah. The Braisa, the Mishnah here that says that we're lenient is that hayais, it's a institution midrabanan. So therefore, when it comes to different sfeikis of how you measured, we go with the more lenient measuring.
The concept of tchumen is the chumrah.
To be machmer more than Torah. Correct. We're mekel.
So what is the chumrah?
It's more than Minat Torah. You can walk out of the tchum. So the etzem inyan of tchumen is a chumrah. The what? It doesn't refer to tchumen. It doesn't refer to tchumen. And besides Rabbi Akiva, we had a few times. Rabbi Akiva is the one that holds that tchumen is deraisa. But we don't follow Rabbi Akiva's opinion. If it's a tchum of more than Yud Beis Mil, 12 miles, then we follow the inyan of tchum. But not, yeah. Okay, we have some more time. Could we learn a little weiter? Okay, the next Mishnah. Trying to move further over here we fell behind. Zok the Mishnah. This Mishnah is actually going to be discussing a different inyan, Erev Chatzeres. So you remember the halacha of Erev Chatzeres? You have a courtyard with a few houses that are open into a chatzer. So all the people have to share together in one house in order to be able to carry in this chatzer. Otherwise, the houses are private. The chatzer is owned by and used by many people, so it looks like it would appear to people that they're carrying from a private place to a public area. So therefore, they all have to be mishtatif in Eruvi Chatzeres. And it's the same thing with a mavoi. When you have a mavoi that many people are using this mavoi, they all have to be mishtatif together to be able to carry this mavoi. This Mishnah is going to be discussing making an Erev Chatzeres, one Erev Chatzeres for an entire city together. How do you make an Erev Chatzeres for an entire city together? So obviously we're talking about a city that has a wall around it, and we're talking about a city that does not have a Reshus HaRabim, because in Reshus HaRabim you can't make an Erev Chatzeres. Okay, so whatever street it has, as we'll see, Rashi says, is less than 16 amas wide. So you're making an Erev Chatzeres for the entire city. But there's a Gzeira of Chazal that when you make an Erev Chatzeres for an entire city, in certain cases, Chazal will go that the people are going to think that you can carry in a Reshus HaRabim. They're not going to realize that the reason they can carry here is because there was an Eid of Chatzeris made. People might come to think that you're allowed to carry in Rishus Harabim. So therefore, as the Mishnah here will explain, Chachamim made a Gzeira, when you make an Eid of Chatzeris to include an entire city, in certain cases, you have to keep a certain part of the city out of this general Eid of Chatzeris as a heker, as a reminder for people that they should realize that there's an Eid of Chatzeris that was made over here. If you include the entire city in it, so then people just think that you can walk from one end of the city with the other end of the city without any limitation whatsoever. Then they're going to forget that there was an Eid of Chatzeris made b'chlal. So you have to keep one section of the city out of this Eid of Chatzeris to remind people, oh, there's a stop, there's a heker, and that there's an Eid of Chatzeris that was made over here.
Yeah, but if you have a wall around it, so it's not a Rishus Harabim.
Correct. The issue is not the Rishus Harabim. The issue is that there's many Chatzeris here. You have to make an Eid of Chatzeris to be able to carry. But because it's a city and it has streets, it has open streets, so people are going to think that you're allowed to carry in the Rishus Harabim. It's the mistake that people are going to make.
Chatzeris is not Rishus Harabim.
It's Rishus HaYachid. Eid of Chatzeris is even for Rishus HaYachid. We're talking up here about a city that has a wall around it.
Right, so the Rabban, it's just the Chumrah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sagt the Mishnah, Ir Shel Yachid. You have a city that was a city of a Yachid. What is a city of a Yachid? So Rashi says, city of a Yachid is that you did not have 600,000 people that were in the streets of the city or living in the city. The Nasis Shel Rabim. And now this city became a city of a Rabim. More people moved into the city, and now it's a place where there's 600,000 people there. Ma'arven es kula. You can make an Eid of Chatzeris and include the entire city with one Eid of Chatzeris. So in a Ir Shel Yachid, in a place where there's no 600,000 people, Chachama will not geyser that a person might think that you could carry in a Rishus Harabim, because it's B'chlal not a Rishus Harabim. It's not a place which is a Rishus Harabim. There's less than 600,000 people there. According to Rashi, in order for a place to be a Rishus Harabim, it has to be 600,000 people. If there's no 600,000 people, it's B'chlal not similar to a Rishus Harabim, so there's no Gzeira B'chlal. And what the Mishnah is telling you is, even if this Ir Shel Yachid became a Ir Shel Rabim, and now there are 600,000 people, you can still make one Eid of Chatzeris and include the entire city in it. But how about if you have a city, even if it has walls around it, and even if the streets in the city are not 60 namas wide, which is the width that you need for a Rishus Harabim, but it's a city of Harabim. It's a city that there's 600,000 people in it. Even if this city now has less than 600,000 people in it, you can't make an Eid of one Eid of Chatzeris for the entire city. You have to leave out a certain section of the city to make a heker that people should remember that you could only carry here because you made an Eid of Chatzeris.
Why? Because was it once
600,000? Because this is a city that 600,000 people live there. People right. If right now there's 600,000 people there, for sure people are going to make the mistake and think that this is a Rishus Harabim that you can carry in. The Chiddush of the Mishnah is, even if there was 600,000 people there, and now there isn't, but the very fact that there was before, it could always go back to that. It could always become a city again that there's a Rabbim living there. That's what Rashi says. Right? It's going
to do with Tchumen. This is about carrying, right? Nothing to do with
No, nothing to do with Tchumen. Nothing to do with Tchumen. Eid of Chatzeris. We're talking about making one Eid of Chatzeris to be able to carry in the entire city. Exactly. Right, so in a case where it's an Ir Shel Rabim, whether it's presently Ir Shel Rabim, that there's 600,000 people there, or it was the Ir Shel Rabim, here Chachamim made the Gzeira that you can't make one Eid of Chatzeris for the whole city. Elam Ken Oisa Chutzala, you have to leave out a certain section of the city. How large? How large is the area that you have to leave out? Ki'ir Chadasha Shebi Yehuda. Like this city, Chadasha. It's a name of a city, Chadasha and Yehuda. Sheyesh ba chamishim diyurin. There are 50 people living in that section. That's how much you have to leave out to make a separate Eid of Chatzeris for them. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rab Shimon and Rab Shimon says, Gimel Chatzeris shnei batim. You just have to leave out a section that's 3 courtyards of 2 houses. That's enough. That's enough of a heker that people realize that there's an Eid of Chatzeris over here.
They can't carry.
No, they can carry. It's 2 Eid of Chatzeris. They won't be able to carry from this section of the city to the other section of the city because it's 2 separate Eid of Chatzeris that were made. When you make one big Eid of Chatzeris, so everybody can carry from one end to the next. But over here, you're leaving out one section, they can carry in their section, and then the rest of the city carries in the rest of the city. Sagt the Gemara, what's a case of a city that's Shal Yachid, that there were less than 600,000 people, and now it became a city where there are 600,000 people? Amar Rav Yehuda said, Kagoin diskrete de Reish Galusa. It's diskrete of the Reish Galusa. It's a city of the Reish Galusa, the governor, the leader, the head of the city, of the Reish Galusa. That's a place which is very busy, and a lot of people come there, so now it became a place which is very busy, 600,000 people. Amalei of Nachman, my time. What's the reason why he said, Dafka, this example, this case of the district, the Reish Galusa? Ilaim Mishum de Shchichi is the reason that in such a place there's many people there. Because there are many people there, so therefore, what happens? Many people come to the governor, to the leader of that place, and therefore matkiriya hadodi. So because of that, they remind each other. Right? So it said in the Mishnah, you had a city that was shal yachid, now it became shal rabim. Even though now it's shal rabim, there's no gezeira. We still keep the original status that it had of being a city shal yachid. And what's the reason why? Because there's many people there and they're going to remind each other. Many people come to the harmona, there's things that they have to take care of. There's a government official you have to take care of over there. So they're going to remind each other not to carry in the Rishus Rabbim. So Kol Yisrael Nami, so the Gemara asks, so if so, why is it dafke in this example of a Reish Galusa? Always in the cities of Yidden, B'tzafre de Shabbat, shchichi gabi adadi. Morning of Shabbos, people come out, they go to shul. Rashi says they come to hear the drasha of the Chacham. They go out to shul to daven. So in any city, if it was a Ir Shal Yachid, and now there's more people there, and they're carrying in the entire city, there's a native Chatzeres, they'll remind each other in any city. So why are we saying dafka this example of the diskrete de Reish Galusa? So the Gemara says, Elam Rav Nachman kagon diskrete de Natuzoi. You're right. He didn't say taka this specific example of Reish Galusa, a diskrete de Natuzoi, which was a place that belonged to Natuzoi, and there was less people, and now there's more people. Even if there's more people, we still give it the status that it had before with less people. Okay, stop over there.